The tire exploded like a gunshot in the middle of nowhere, tearing through the silence of the empty road as the sleek black SUV lurched violently to one side. In a single terrifying second, a man who owned half the city was reduced to helplessness, stranded on a dusty roadside with nothing but panic, anger, and the creeping realization that money meant absolutely nothing out here. If you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel because stories like this remind us what truly matters. He stepped out of the car in disbelief, his polished shoes sinking into the dirt. The horizon stretched endlessly, broken only by patches of dry grass and a faint line of distant trees. His phone had no signal. The driver he usually relied on had taken the day off. And now, standing there in his tailored suit, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, completely lost. His name was Adrian Cole, a billionaire known for his precision, control, and cold efficiency. He built empires, made impossible deals happen, and crushed competitors without hesitation. But standing beside that damaged SUV, staring at a shredded tire, none of that power followed him. The world didn't care who he was. Out here, he was just another man with a problem he couldn't solve. Minutes passed like hours under the blazing sun. Sweat soaked through his shirt, his frustration growing with every passing second. He tried flagging down passing vehicles, but none came. The road felt abandoned, as if the world had forgotten this place entirely. His irritation turned into quiet desperation. And then he heard it, a faint metallic clank, followed by the rhythmic hiss of air. He turned. A small, weathered roadside shack stood a few meters away, almost invisible against the dusty backdrop. Outside it, crouched beside a pile of worn tires, was a woman. Her hands were covered in grease, her clothes simple and stained from years of labor. Her hair was tied back in short twists, and her expression carried a calm focus that seemed untouched by the chaos of the world. She didn't look up immediately. She kept working as if she already knew he was there. Adrian hesitated. Pride flickered inside him, but desperation won. He walked toward her, his steps slower now, uncertain in a way he hadn't been in years. Up close, he noticed the strength in her arms, the quiet determination in her posture. This was someone who had fought for every inch of her life. Oh. She finally looked up, her eyes sharp but not unkind. There was no awe, no recognition, no reaction to his expensive clothes or the luxury car behind him. To her, he was just another customer. She stood, wiped her hands on a cloth, and walked past him toward the SUV without asking a single question. Adrian followed, confused but strangely relieved. She crouched by the damaged tire, inspecting it with practiced precision. Within seconds, she had already assessed what he couldn't even begin to understand. Her movements were efficient, confident, almost graceful in their simplicity. There was no hesitation, no doubt. It was as if the chaos that had shaken Adrian meant nothing to her. She had seen worse, handled worse, survived worse. As she worked, Adrian found himself watching her in silence. Something about her presence unsettled him, not in fear, but in contrast. She lived in a world where nothing was guaranteed, where survival depended on skill and resilience. And yet, she carried a calm he had never known. He realized then how fragile his own world was. All his wealth, his influence, his carefully constructed life, it all depended on systems, people, and circumstances he didn't control. And here was someone who relied on none of that. The repair didn't take long. With tools that looked older than him and hands that moved with certainty, she replaced the damaged tire and secured it firmly. When she stood up, the job was done. Adrian reached for his wallet, pulling out more cash than most people in that area would see in months. He extended it toward her, expecting at least a flicker of surprise. But she simply looked at the money, then at him, and calmly named a price. One that was fair, modest, almost shockingly low. For the first time in years, Adrian didn't know what to say. He paid her, but something inside him shifted. He lingered, unsure why he didn't want to leave just yet. The world he knew felt distant, almost irrelevant compared to the quiet strength of the woman standing in front of him. Her name, he later learned, was Amara. Days turned into weeks, but Adrian couldn't forget that moment. Back in the city, surrounded by glass towers and endless meetings, his mind kept drifting back to that dusty roadside, to the woman who had treated him like he was no one special and somehow made him feel more human than anyone ever had. He returned. At first, he told himself it was curiosity. Then he said it was gratitude. But deep down, he knew it was something else entirely. Each visit revealed more of her world. He saw the long hours she worked under the sun, the small meals she ate, the quiet way she helped others who couldn't even afford her modest prices. He saw how people trusted her, respected her, not because of wealth, but because of who she was. And slowly, painfully, Adrian began to see himself more clearly. He saw the emptiness behind his success, the loneliness he had buried under ambition. He saw how he had built walls so high that no one could truly reach him. And for the first time, he wanted those walls to fall. But love, especially one born from two completely different worlds, is never simple. Adrian's life was filled with expectations, with people who saw relationships as transactions, alliances, or strategies. Amara's world had no room for such things. She valued honesty, effort, and heart. Things that couldn't be bought. The gap between them was vast, not just in wealth, but in experience and perspective, in everything that shaped who they were. There were moments of doubt, moments where Adrian questioned whether he even deserved to stand in her world. There were moments where Amara kept her distance, unsure if someone like him could ever truly understand her life. But something kept pulling them together. It was in the quiet moments, the shared glances, the unspoken understanding, the way they both began to change without realizing it. Adrian started to slow down, to listen, to care about things beyond profit and power. Amara began to trust, to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone from a completely different world could see her for who she truly was. And as their bond deepened, so did the challenges. Adrian's world didn't accept Amara easily. Whispers turned into criticism, judgment disguised as concern. People questioned his choices, his judgment, his sanity. They couldn't understand how a man who had everything could choose someone who had so little. But Adrian knew something they didn't. She had something money could never buy. She had strength, compassion, authenticity. She had a heart that saw people, not status. She had given him something he didn't even know he needed, a reason to feel again. And in the end, that mattered more than anything else. If this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with someone who believes love can come from the most unexpected places. As the sun set on the same dusty road where it all began, Adrian stood beside Amara once more. The world around them hadn't changed, but they had. He no longer saw that moment as an accident. It was a turning point, a collision not just of a tire, but of two lives that were never meant to meet, and yet somehow did. Before we reach the end, I have a special request for you. Comment below the word hope if you believe that love can rise from the most unlikely places. Adrian didn't just fall in love with Amara, he found himself through her. And Amara didn't just help a stranger that day. She changed the course of a life that had everything except what truly mattered. And maybe that's the real story. Not about a billionaire, not about a vulcanizer, but about two souls who met at the exact moment they needed each other, and proved that sometimes the most broken roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, take a moment to like, comment, and share it. Because stories like this deserve to be felt, remembered, and passed on. The city never slept, but for the first time in years, Adrian Cole wished it would slow down. After that evening on the dusty roadside, something inside him refused to return to the way it was. Boardroom conversations felt hollow, signatures on billion-dollar deals felt mechanical, and the applause he once thrived on now echoed like noise without meaning. Every success reminded him of something missing, something he had only just begun to understand when Amara stepped into his life. He started visiting her more often, not as a billionaire seeking escape, but as a man searching for something real. Each visit stripped away another layer of who he used to be. He stopped arriving in luxury convoys and instead came alone. He traded his expensive suits for simpler clothes, as if trying to blend into a world that didn't revolve around status. Amara noticed, but she never commented. She continued her work the same way she always had. focused, steady ground. She didn't treat him differently, didn't admire his wealth, didn't question his choices. And strangely, that was what drew him closer. Around her, he didn't have to be Adrian Cole, the billionaire. He could just be Adrian. But change is never welcomed easily, especially not in a world built on control and reputation. The whispers began quietly. At first, it was a few curious questions from colleagues. Then it turned into subtle warnings from business partners. Eventually, it became open disapproval. People who once respected Adrian began to question his decisions, his priorities, even his sanity. To them, his connection with Amara was not just unusual, it was unacceptable. They couldn't understand why a man with limitless options would choose someone from a life so far removed from his own. The pressure intensified. Adrian was invited to fewer elite gatherings. Important deals were delayed or quietly handed to others. Investors began to hesitate. His personal choices were now seen as a reflection of his judgment, and in their eyes, he was making a mistake. But the hardest blow didn't come from the business world. It came from within. Late at night, when the noise faded and the city lights dimmed, Adrian found himself questioning everything. Not his feelings for Amara, but whether he deserved her at all. He thought about her life. The years she spent struggling, working under the sun, building her strength through hardship. And then he thought about himself, a man who had always had resources, power, and opportunity. What did he really understand about her world? What could he offer her that wouldn't feel like control or imbalance? These doubts weighed heavily on him, and Amara felt it too. She saw the tension in his eyes, the hesitation in his presence. She noticed how his visits became quieter, more thoughtful, as if he was carrying something he couldn't express. For Amara, love was never about grand gestures or promises. It was about honesty, and she could sense that Adrian was fighting a battle he hadn't yet shared. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Adrian stood beside her in silence. The same road where they first met stretched before them unchanged, but everything between them had evolved. For the first time, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. He spoke, not with confidence or control, but with uncertainty. He admitted his fears, his doubts, his worry that their worlds were too different, too far apart to ever truly meet. Amara listened quietly. When he finished, there was no immediate response. Just the sound of the wind brushing against the dry grass, the distant hum of a passing vehicle, and the weight of truth hanging between them. And then, in the simplest way, she made him understand something he had overlooked his entire life. Wasn't about where you came from. It was about what you chose to become. She didn't need his wealth. She didn't want his status. She only needed to know one thing, that he was willing to stand beside her not as a savior, not as a provider, but as an equal. That moment changed everything. Adrian realized that love, real love, didn't require perfection. It required presence. It required honesty. It required the courage to step out of your world and meet someone halfway. From that day forward, he made a choice not to abandon his world, but to redefine it. He began to shift his priorities. He invested in communities like Amara's, not for recognition, but for impact. He supported small businesses, created opportunities, and focused on building something meaningful beyond profit. And for the first time, his success felt different. It felt human. Amara, too, allowed herself to open up. She shared her past, her struggles, the silent battles she had fought to survive and stand strong. She let him see the parts of her life she had kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of strength. Their worlds didn't merge overnight. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, still people who didn't understand. But none of it mattered as much as what they had built together, because what they had wasn't based on circumstance. It was built on choice. As time passed, the road that once symbolized isolation became a place of beginnings. The small roadside shack grew into something more, not just a place for fixing tires, but a symbol of resilience, of hope, of transformation. And Adrian, the man who once measured his life in numbers and achievements, found something far greater. He found peace, he found purpose, he found love. If this story touched your heart, take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who believes in unexpected love, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Sometimes it breaks you to lead you exactly where you were meant to be. And in Adrian's case, it took a broken road, a shattered tire, and a woman with grease on her hands to show him that the most valuable things in life are never bought. They are found. So, if you've ever doubted that love can cross every boundary, every difference, every expectation, remember this story. Because somewhere out there, two completely different worlds are waiting to collide. And when they do, they might just create something beautiful.